chairman until Sunday.
She's quite content like that as well as she's not.
Maybe just
Anybody
leave cold in the freezer. That's all right. No problem.
How are you? Fantastic.
pH you want to be acidic at the finished product. And I'll share a website that I got that did my own research on, so that you can get answers a lot of questions if you're as detailed of a person that you want to actually use the pH test strips for and get exact numbers. Yeah, you can opt for that. It's not that technical though. So it's pretty forgiving. You can, if you have visionware, you can actually,
Like a Pyrex, I use a big Pyrex.
yeah, that's fine. That's
Big
fine.
bags.
Right. It's basically the fermenting vessel needs to be glass. And we'll go over
Yes, that I
that.
know.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of get an assessment of everyone's kind of background or knowledge or newness to it. We'll walk through the steps and talk about very little. I told her that's the way in class.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. So I think this is going to be quite a bit of a cultural experience, I guess I could call it. We're going to be working with cultures today, so now they got it. So just to give us a little history about us, Nature's Pavilion. We've been here for 14 years. I know most of you have been our good customers, and one of the main things that we are focused on is education. We feel that once the consumer is educated, they're going to make the right buying decisions, and that's how this industry is all about taking your health under your own control, not letting others dictate what to do and what not to do. So we had started with this store as a way of educating consumers, providing a lot of educational events. We had kind of moved away a little bit for a while, but we are coming back full force. The last event we did was on how to make homemade yogurt, and I had brought in this culture that we had used, that's probably used for, I would say about 10,000 years in the past. So this culture, I had gotten my hand on this culture, I tasted the yogurt, I said this is the same one I grew up with. And I did some research and looked into all the health benefits of this particular strain, and I said we got to do something, kind of get it in. So we actually had an event here where we gave out the culture to everybody, and I have still customers who are coming back telling me they're making it every time, every week, and they love the yogurt. So it is the best tasting. So if you're interested in that, we will be having another one probably September or somewhere at that time. So another good way of staying in touch with events that we are doing now with the new electronic media and everything is through the website and emails. It becomes a little bit difficult to call everybody because we have literally about 6,000 people on our list. So those who are interested in this event, if you sign up for the mailing, it makes it a lot easier. We can just press one button and it goes out to everybody. So that's something that we are doing. One other thing that we see here, 14 years ago when we first opened, we used to see little kids who were coming in here with their parents, and to see those very same kids now making their own buying decisions, coming in, sometimes with their own kids, and now they're doing all these things. To me, that's like one of the best things that I can imagine. They're literally, the parents bringing the kids in here had an impact in their decision making, and now it's going to have an impact on the rest of their life as they grow and have their kids of their own. So I think that's a great thing to see when I see that. Today's event is something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, but I had no idea where to start. I myself was trying to get a hold of one of this culture that looks pretty slimy to me, but I've tried the drink. I don't know if I would have drank this if I had seen this first, but I saw this first and I looked a lot prettier. So I tried it, and what happened is actually I was driving to Pittsburgh from here on a Friday. And it was, I get really tired by Friday, everything gets, catches up, and it's a 6-hour drive. So it gets a little hectic sometimes, and sometimes you get a little, want to pull over and take a little nap or anything. I had one of this bottle with me, and as I was driving, I was noticing that I really didn't feel any fatigue whatsoever. I'm like, what's going on today? What's different? And then I was just drinking the bottle every few minutes or whatever, and then I just realized the only thing different was that I actually had a kombucha drink while I was driving, and that made a huge difference for me. And that's when I started really looking into it, but I never really got to the point of making it. I had customers asking me all the time, where can I get scobies? Where can I get scobies? So I was looking into getting them to sell and everything. And then this opportunity came where she said, you know what, I will bring it this time, and I will give it to the customers. Wow. So just so you understand, these things they go around $18, $19 a piece, sometimes more. So I think that there's a lot that we owe her in terms of what she's doing. She's donating all her time to this whole thing to educate everybody. So I think that, first of all, I want to thank you from Nature's Pavilion, but I know a lot of my customers are going to be very appreciative. In case everybody wants to know, her name is Nakia Vagorski. Pronunciation was going to be tough. So as I said, she was introduced to me by a friend of hers. So I would like to welcome her. But before I do that, there is another event coming up I don't have the exact date yet. I think it's July 30th. It's going to be, the title is going to be Natural Solution to Common Health Concerns. How Mother Nature has a solution to every ailment. It's going to be presented by Sylvia. She's the rep for a new chapter, very knowledgeable. She has done several events here, so be on the lookout for her. And here's Nakia. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you because I'm excited about the opportunity to share my passion with Scoby and Kombucha because of what my experience with it. So, and I hope everyone can hear me. I'll shout louder if you can hear me in the back.
A little bit.
Okay.
Everybody sign in?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure.
So what I wanted to do, and I thought, first of all, I'm not an expert on Scoby, but I have been doing it for 8 years. And I think that the most beneficial thing that I can bring to the table before everyone is that when you go online and look up kombucha and you want to do it as a first time, there must be 100 videos that say these ingredients, this thing, do's, don'ts, and the most frustrating part of it is that they contradict each other. Don't use this, don't use this. So I thought it would be really useful and helpful so that as you're introduced to it, that you can say, okay, these are my options, here's why this works and this doesn't, or I should with this, but ultimately it is your choice and it'll yield variations with your kombucha or your Scoby culture. So with that said, just so I can have an assessment, how many people are brand new to it? Maybe they only have a friend who has brewed kombucha, or you heard about it and you want to try it, and so you're going to need the full rundown. Okay, so most. And how many people have brewed a batch before? Okay, and you're familiar with. All right, so we got so that's good to know. And then also anybody on time constraints where they're kind of they've already done research, they are basically here for a briefing, in, out, leaving. No time constraints. So little. Okay, so within the hour.
Okay, okay, so, going forward with that, I just wanted to grab what this is. So what I'm gonna do is streamline, I'm gonna really streamline this and qualify on the back of your packets are the supplies. And I just kind of brought out my kitchenware to walk you through the process, so it kind of is a visual demonstration because my sheet's kind of long to kind of walk through. So what I wanted to start with is in the supplies, basically you can use any size jar. So it's a clear glass jar. I'm going to go by, just gauge it by a 1 gallon because this is what I make and this is what I fill. I have 4 jars at home, so I kind of make it on a larger scale, but you can go down as small as, as small as this. So to keep it easy and simple in terms of, well, how do I calculate liter into this and the ratios, basically what you want to do is have, as we're walking through this, you're going to have 10% of your starter, and the rest of it is going to, so whether you do a liter, a half a gallon, a full gallon, a gallon and a quarter, whatever it is, you're going to basically allow, about an inch from the top. So you're going to have your container with a wide mouth opening. The reason you want a wide mouth opening is because you want air ventilating and going through, because this is a living culture. It's a pure culture. Scoby means, anybody familiar with the word Scoby? Let's start with that. So, and the rest of you are not. All right. So what this is, what these cultures are, it's an acronym. Scoby means a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. So it's an interconnected network or matrix. It's kind of like a cellulose pancake. It's slippery. You'll notice it here, and kind of like even like a gelatinous mat. So when you are starting out, you'll have your Scoby culture that you obtain from a friend, or that you grow yourself, or that however you obtain it. As the new ones form, it actually is more of a haze. As it matures, it starts to get a little thicker, and then you'll actually see it, and then they actually grow together. So it took me a while to kind of separate them and divide them up so that everyone can walk home with one this evening. So on the supply list, so clear glass jar. We want to make sure no porcelain, no plastic, no metal, no aluminum, no enamelware, no again, earthenware, no stainless steel. That pertains to the fact that the cultures, as it's fermenting, is going to extract in its detoxification properties. It's going to extract and basically take out like plastics and metals. So like let's say you have metals in your system, any kind of plastic, residue, etc. That's the benefits and the detoxifying properties of it. So you always want to make sure in your kombucha that's fermenting, it's going to be glass only. No colored glass, as in carnival glass, because it has its own toxins. Tinted things like visionware, corning, it's okay to brew on the stove. So you're going to have your black or green tea. You're going to have organic sugar, and I'll qualify that as well, and a large stainless steel or glass cooking pot just to boil your water, and that dissolves the sugar and steeps your tea. So having on hand a wooden spoon, a measuring glass, around your kitchen, a glass dish. This is later in batching, only to place your Scoby in when you're batching up your finished product. So if we're going to begin, just kind of like starting out, before I begin actually, I want to emphasize and re-emphasize and reiterate cleanliness. Cleanliness is a must. We're talking wash your hands, scrub the fingernails because bacteria, microbes, under the nails, under false nails, even rings. You want to remove your rings, just again to prevent anything. I actually use, when you're drying off, I use, this comes from ShopRite. It's a lint-free a towel that absorbs, so it doesn't leave any kind of residue or lint or anything. but spritz your, even though you pull this out of your cupboards, it's good to just spritz it with a little vinegar. Just rinse it off, just because sitting in your cupboard, you know, there's air pathogens, there's pet dander, there's plant spores, you know, natural dust that is around the house. So once you kind of clean your surface space, you'll take your pot. It can be glass again. It can be your stainless steel pot. You're putting it on the stove. I fill it up. So however much you're going to use, fill it up. Boil the water. Once it comes to a boil, you're going to, for a 1 gallon, 6 to 8 tea bags of black or green tea. Now obviously if you're cooking less, if you're only making like, say this size, you're going to, you know, reduce it a little bit. But you're going to, once your water is boiled, you're going to let it steep. You're going to put your sugar in. And I go, for this size, I actually go about 2 cups. And this is, when I actually measured this is about a gallon and a quarter. Actually, I should lift this so you guys can see back here. This is what I use. So you'll let this, once it comes to a boil, put about 1.5 cups to 1 3/4 cups sugar in it. And then dissolve it, let it dissolve. Put your tea bags in, your 6 to 8 tea bags in it. What I do is I leave it until it goes to room temperature because you don't want to scald your culture. It's a living organism, you don't want to scald it. And what I do is with this size, it takes about 12 hours. So for convenience, if I boil this in the morning, by the same time in the evening, it's ready to go. And then you'll transfer this to, say, your glass jar. Once this is in there, you can then put your SCOBY culture in it. You'll always want to, I'll pretend this is my jar. Whatever your liquid is, you want 10% of it to either be a previous batch of kombucha. If you don't have that, you can use distilled vinegar, white distilled vinegar. So it'll be 10% of it. That will kick off the fermenting process. And then you leave this to go for about 7 to 12 days before you do your first taste test. So what that does is it's going to give a chance for the culture to feed on the sugar, and then it's going to convert the sugars into organic acids, your natural ones within your digestive system. It's going to convert the rest of it into your B vitamins and enzymes that's beneficial for your body to restore your normal flora of your intestinal tract and balance your yeast inside your system. So then what you want to do, going into this, let me just keep this. And also, if anybody has any questions, just shoot your hand up because, okay.
If I was to boil half the water and steep my tea in it and then add the remaining water to it, would that work as well?
That works. There's an expedited process exactly like that. You could boil a cup of water, just enough to melt the sugar, steep your tea, pour it in, then put your water choice in. What I want to do is share some options when you're making decisions about water, because that comes up a lot. Do I use distilled? Do I use tap? Do I use purified, bottled, filtered? And there's a lot of things that are involved with whatever choice you make on that. One thing to keep in mind is when you're using tap water, if you know that in your town the tap water is kind of questionable, you can boil the water, okay? Boil the water, add a little vinegar in it. Other people choose to use bottled water. Now for purists, there's things to keep in mind. People will say, oh, well, I want bottled water because, there's all the things in the tap water that doesn't get boiled out. Then conversely, then you have the option of bottled water, spring water, but then you have those individuals that say, oh, but there's phthalates. If anybody is familiar with phthalates, it's, the plastics that if you look it up on, it's the chemicals, the petrochemicals, the chemicals that are inside the plastics that leach into the water. So to expedite your process, you can definitely do that. You boil your hot water, then your room temperature water or your cold water or your bottled water can then dump in, and you don't have to wait 12 hours. You don't have to wait anything. That does expedite the steps. But there are definitely options and things to think about in terms of your water source.
Now, I did hear somewhere that a lot of the bottled water nowadays is just reused and somewhat purified tap water, that it's really not much better for you. Is there anything like that?
Well, you know, it's interesting again because if you do a lot of research on tap water, a lot of research on how filtered water and that the news stories about bottled water from the source isn't that much better. Really, there is no perfect solution. You just got to make the best choice according to how you want to proceed with it. Because, go ahead.
What about with water distiller? I use a distilled water that we drink. So is there glass vinegar than that, or is there any?
You can use distilled water. The reason why I'm bringing this out between the water choices and between the sugar choices is because different methods will breed in or breed out different yeasts or bacterias that are basically the constituents of the kombucha. So it's ever changing. One little thing could change, but that doesn't change the nutrition. It just means that each SCOBY could be different and changes. It evolves and changes based on the tea you use, the sugar you use, the water, you know, and so forth. So
what do you do? What kind of?
you know, I live in Fairfield. I'm okay with the water. I mean, I do drink bottled water, but I actually boil it from my tap.
Filtered water from the tap is good, right? I have it filtered through my system. That would work.
Yeah, that works fine.
And my question was the sugar. Does it have to be
The sugar too.
regular sugar? In other words, how about coconut sugar or, you know, other stuff?
This is another question that you'll see as this or that, this, not that in videos. Sugar, again, is an option. People will say no honey, then others say honey. Then some say only white sugar, only raw sugar, only cane sugar, and so forth. The battle goes on and on. The thing about the sugar is it can be, well, first of all, let me back up a little. Anybody, again, that's purists that are here because optimal health, you're avoiding certain things for nutritional value. If individuals that are here are like, I don't want GMOs, you know, if you're familiar with GMOs, genetically modified ingredients, engineered ingredients, regular white sugar is made from beets. It's processed by beets. It's beet sugar. Holly sugar, it's all over ShopRite. You'll see Holly logo. So I opt for organic because again, keeping things organic is kind of, you know, it's beneficial in the end for the integrity of the culture and your SCOBY being viable for a long time, from SCOBY after SCOBY that multiplies itself. So you can use Demerara, I think it's called Demerara. That's a natural brown sugar. Brown sugar is just white sugar with molasses in it. And again, I stick everything organic. Okay, it's worth the extra for me, or you know, individuals. It's worth the extra for organic, keeping it organic. Yeah.
I just missed, so you were saying 68 tea bags, and I missed how much sugar?
For a gallon, a cup and a half to a cup and three quarters.
Oh, it's over here?
Oh,
sorry.
Page one.
I'm sorry.
And again, if you're using a smaller container, just kind of scale it down a little. And again, you can go online and say kombucha, and based on your size container, there's a recipe of ingredients for it. But it's, yes.
So when this is finished, is it an acidic drink, or is it an alcohol, or is it balanced?
This is going to be acidic. It's going to be at the drinking stage. The finished product is between a 2.5. I mean, yes, a 2.5 and a 3. But but it's beneficial. It's actually good for your
Right,
body.
well, that's pretty close to what the natural acidity would be in
For the normal flora.
Circling back to the sugar, could you use another sweetener like maple syrup, honey, in place of the sugar?
So there are choices. I didn't do a lot of research into like nectar, agave, but with honey, yes, people do use honey. Yes, they've had kombucha just fine. Yes, their kombucha lives where other sites say absolutely stay away from it. The thing I want to share about honey is a natural, has natural antibacterial properties. It has antimicrobial properties. This is a bacteria. So now you're gonna change, now will your SCOBY die? No, but it's going to alter the, I think it's called Acetobacter xylanum, or Acidobacter, I'm not sure the way you pronounce it, but I know what it is when I see it. But that's primarily what this is, one of the bacterias in this. And honey will alter some of those bacteria, the bacteria of the colony of the matrix. So again, you can, it's about making choices, but with some extra education behind it, so that you know that, if your SCOBY ends up dying out within a couple of new ones or a couple of batches, just think about the factors that could have been involved in that. But you can always rejuvenate them again. So you do have different sugars you can use. What happens is your SCOBY just might end up being weaker, or it'll just end up kind of becoming.
How do you know when it dies out? Does it take
Well,
off?
what happens is it'll either just stop producing new ones because they multiply themselves. Pretty soon you'll have a SCOBY farm. You're gonna, like, if I didn't have this class, all these would have went to the trash or in my garden. So, so I was happy to give them away. And it was just like, separate them, give them out to people because they multiply themselves. There's not a profitable return, so, again, it's something that's really good for you, and it works with your body, it restores your normal flora, your bacteria and yeast will, balancing. And everybody's symptoms are different. You might notice things. I personally had, definitely have my story behind it. But yeah, sugars, again, you can try the maple syrups. I have seen it used online. I kind of stick to the raw cane sugar because of basically the complex, I'm not sure about the complex structure of the white sugars or the cane sugars, but from what I've read in my file and folders, is the most nutritious for the SCOBY in terms of the sugar nutrients for it. It just keeps your SCOBY viable and multiplying. My original SCOBY that I had was back in 2007.
Wow.
It lasted until last year, just multiplying over and over and over and over. Then when it finally died and just kind of stopped reproducing, was weak, I just ended up regrowing my SCOBYs from brand new. So these are all from this year.
Do you refrigerate them or you keep them out?
I keep them all out.
Really?
I keep them all out.
Keep them out forever?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Even when I put them away, I don't deal with them for like 6 months.
So why are they refrigerated when you buy them like this?
Well, as a finished product, the drink is refreshing when it's cold,
Oh.
and
It
these
doesn't
are,
have to be.
this is for consumer, it's a consumer product, so it's
Right.
refrigerated. But ultimately, it doesn't have to be. You could store kombucha in your cupboard and leave it there.
Drink it hot.
Yeah. So so going back to your sugars, as far as fruit, throwing fruit in here, some people think, oh, can I put fruit in? Well, you would want to actually put the fruit in, infusing it at the finished product, not in with your kombucha SCOBY, not with the actual colony or the culture. Let's see. So ultimately, the warmer the environment of your room temperature, unless you have air conditioned really cold during the summer. Typically the summer months, between 70 and 90 degrees. It's qualifying it on this a little bit, on my instructions. I think I put like 70 to 84 or something, I can't remember, but there's a bigger range than that. It'll ferment between 70 and 90, and that's why in the summer months, like in the summer in my house, mine will be done in 5 days because it's warm. In the winter months, it takes a little longer, more like 14 to 20 days. And depending on, how cooler your house gets, sometimes a little longer, but you can, all this process is a taste test. Wait your first 8 to 10 days, test it, taste it. If it's sugary, because you put the 2 cups of sugar in the beginning, your cup and a half to cup and 3/4, it's just gonna taste very sugary, like your sugary green tea or your sugary black tea that you use. So you just keep it covered and let it continue to ferment until it has that balance of tartness and sweetness. Because I happen to use green tea, and then I use the cane sugar. Sometimes I'll use the demerara, which is kind of brown looking. It looks like a brown sugar. This kind of ends up tasting like a Granny Smith apple with like a little, kind of like an apple cider kind of kick to it, a little zing at the end. So you want a balance of tart with sweet. A little more to the tart side is more medicinal for you because you want to make sure that the sugar has been converted into the beneficial things for your normal flora, for your digestive tract, and so forth.
You mentioned that you use green tea. I thought you had to use some white teas, because it feeds on the scoby, feeds on the sugar.
The tea choices are yours to make also. Teas also are a factor, black tea or green tea. Now, the thing about teas is that you have to stay away from pretty kind of much herbal teas because of oils. If you use black tea, stay away from just the Earl Greys. They have oils, they're known as volatile oils, and you don't want to have that interrupt the culture.
Maybe it was just plain green tea.
Plain green tea, white
It has to
tea.
be caffeine, right?
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. The culture will actually use the caffeine in the process of converting, the acids, the vitamins and the enzymes, but it's not necessary. But again, there's choice options. It's flexible, and there's slight variations.
Does the finished product contain any caffeine?
The finished product, it's very minimal.
Okay.
It's very minimal. Same with the sugar. It's very minimal because the sugar is sucrose. Okay. What it's converting into is a form of glucose and fructose, not the high fructose.
It does contain alcohol though.
Yeah, it does contain a little alcohol, yes.
And
So-
that's a little bit too, but there's a little bit, and but it's not. And again, if you want to ferment it longer, the longer it ferments, simply the longer it ferments, it's just gonna become more vinegary, which doesn't really harm you. It's just gonna be more like drinking some apple cider vinegar in the end. But you want to strike the balance again. So if you if you're particular about, let me measure, I want to use the pH strips. The pH strips would be between 2.5 and 3 as your finished product. If you don't want to get that technical, it's not necessary. You can just do a taste test, and because it's more intuitive, you're going to be like, this is it. I want it at this.
What is this supposed to taste like? What's the taste test from nobody that has ever tasted it?
It's kind of going to be a carbonated fizzy drink. It's going to just be refreshing, and really, it's it varies. Like you might like it slightly sweeter. Some people might like a little sharper vinegar, like a little sharper tang to it, really. So it's more about making. Once you pass the 10-day mark, you're pretty much safe as far as the sugar. So it's just a matter of your preference, and then you have questions.
Yeah, I understand that you can refrigerate it, make it cooler, but heating it, because it's a living organism, does that destroy it naturally?
Are you talking about the finished product or the Scoby?
Finished product.
I suppose you could heat it, but it's gonna actually it's gonna affect
Culture, right?
It's right. It's gonna alter everything that you did to ferment the process. So it kind of backtracks you. I haven't really heard of somebody really heating it.
Most cultures, fermented cultures, will destroy it with like oil. So like if you want to just warm it, but not, make it really hot.
You know what, I actually just read this afternoon, that up to 100 degrees, the culture will stay alive. So that's a little bit cooler than what you're gonna have a cup of warm tea.
Right.
Up to 100 degrees. It said definitely not, boiling definitely will kill everything.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And even if you get to 105, it just starts killing it off and you lose the beneficial properties.
So yeah.
So, I know you're saying that it can't, become cold, like it really matters with the fermenting process. I've always bought it refrigerated. So, does that kill off any of the beneficial properties, or is it better to have it room temperature?
That's a matter of taste preference.
Okay.
When on my finished product, I bottle mine in big, and I stick them right in the fridge. And in fact, and what happens is, it'll tone down a little bit of the zingy taste if you let yours go tart. It kind of tames it down a little, and it'll continue to ferment. It'll still have the bubble, especially if you drop some like ginger and apple in it and infuse it with fruit. And what happens is it'll continue to start forming like a little bit of like the cell, you know, the scoby at the bottom, which is why you can buy 2 bottles of this, put it in your jar, give it some sugar, and you'll grow a scoby right out of your company, right from this.
So you can try this after it's all done. If somebody wants to try it, I opened the bottle just now, and if somebody wants to try it, we'll have a sample later on.
What I wanted to also mention too is, because it's a lot of information to take in at once just to start the process. And we'll do a follow-up course for those of you taking home, you know, one of the scobies that I have out of my farm here. To either bring back, if you have questions, or bring back some of what you ended up brewing. Because, you know, it's kind of a little disconcerting to be really excited about something you get at home. You know, then you're wondering, is this right? Is it mold? Is this, you know, all these things happening? And then you kind of just throw it out the window because you're like, oh.
I was just going to make 2 comments. One with the refrigeration. I noticed that it just slows down the fermentation process.
Yeah.
It just, but I started mine from 2 bottles, and I actually brought mine. And the first one was a little sweet. The second one smelled like rotten oranges. You know, so it's a process. You have to do it 3 or 4 times, and hopefully.
Was it a flavored one, or did you buy the originals?
I bought the originals, so there's no flavor in it.
Okay.
And the first one was fine, it was just a little sweet. The second one, it had its odor to it, and I couldn't figure out, and then it just smelled like oranges when they're starting to go a little bit.
Okay.
But it wasn't bad, it just smelled.
How
so
was the SCOBY culture?
The SCOBY seemed fine.
And it's still fine?
It's, yeah, I mean, I bought it just so you can look at it now. It's I'm excited. You know what it is? I just to see it too. You know what it is? It's like, you can watch those videos, but when something happens, like mine had little brown, all of a sudden like this brown strings. I'm like, what is this? The videos don't troubleshoot it for you.
Right.
So it's good to have someone or talk to someone who has been doing it and say, is this normal?
And I'll have an email, you know, so that if anyone wants to take my email and they have questions in between now and the time we schedule the follow-up, it's like a mini course, you know, just.
My question kind of relates to that. Mine also had a little bit of, I don't know if it's like black or brownish color. So I just kind of peeled that layer and threw it away. Did I have to do that? And this was a young SCOBY.
What happens is they'll start out creamy, they'll look all beautiful, and then by the second batch, third batch, the one beneath, sometimes the ones on top will start to turn brown, darker brown, even darker brown. All that is the tannins from the tea. So it's really okay.
Oh, okay.
It's viable, it's, you know, it should be fine. The only thing you're concerned with is watching for wild yeast or mold, which is, you'll know it when you see it. It's fuzzy, it's green, it's fuzzy black. But if you see brown spots or it gets bumpy, all that is are variations of temperatures, variations of airspace, it's variations of the ratios that you made on your ingredients. Because what I want to, again, keeping my little note here, about any little change in any of these little factors, even though, you know, your finished product is fine, but your SCOBY might look a little different. I've had perfect ones that come out like thick right away. I've had some that are just thin, and there's some thin in there. Then I've had some that are bumpy and kind of gnarly looking, they're not so pretty.
What's your oldest SCOBY?
It's my oldest one. My oldest one ultimately just isn't around anymore because that was the one from 2007, and eventually they just stopped producing. So all of these came from 2 original bottles dumped in. So this is all right from your product right over there, of the original flavor. And so they will multiply themselves. And so the key thing here is whatever choices you make, keep it consistent, you know, in terms of temperature, length, and taste, and whatever. If you want to experiment, that's fine. You can experiment with your choices in sugar. Sometimes different sugars will make your finished product flat or not fizzy. So that's kind of something to gauge, if like it wasn't so great or had a strange smell. You know, that will be kind of what we'll follow up on in the next class. Differences in sugar, differences in teas, differences in.
What happens if you get contamination in the mold or acidity, that other stuff? You have to throw the whole batch out or?
Don't try to save it. You'll see things, oh, just some vinegar, wash it off, maybe cut it out. No, throw away the whole thing. Mold spore, nothing, yeah. Bad mold, no. So, you know, it's so easy to grow a new one. It's not worth having any kind of contamination. I mean, even if it's a batch you don't really like, and if you don't feel like trying to correct it with some sugar and like fermenting it longer or whatever, throw your batch out. It's not a big deal.
It seems like you get mold in there all the time.
It's a tea bag.
Do you normally get mold contaminating these things?
I have never had it. I've been doing this 8 years consistently. Never had a mold problem, ever. Never had a mold problem. Well, let's kind of go this direction.
When you're doing your taste test while it's still fermenting, is there something to be aware of so you're not contaminating it? Like, you're not going to be able to pour it to taste it using a spoon, but is metal an issue?
You can put a straw in or dip a ladle in. It's okay that a plastic ladle touches, you know, just to dip in, because it's not in contact with it to leach it. It's just, you know, you want to kind of, yeah, so that's okay. A straw, a wooden spoon, yeah, pretty much anything quick.
What is your personal story? You said you had a story how you got involved with this.
I do. Mine is that I knew things about my health that I was concerned with from the time I was like 13. I would lose massive amount of hair, sinkfuls of hair, tubfuls of hair, pretty much my whole life. I had a problem with sugar. Just one quick story about it. This is how bad it was. I'd go to work. Within a 2-hour window in the morning, I'd go to the vending machine and buy Hostess apple pies. And inside of a 2-hour window, I had 16. Wow. 16. Or I'd buy 3 boxes of Twinkies, eat them before noon at my desk, at my cubicle. And at first, you know, for a long time, my coworkers were laughed. They thought it was a riot. They're like, okay, she's going to go on her sugar crash now. Until they got scared, and then they actually locked the boxes away. You're going to send yourself into glycemic shock. You're going to end up in the hospital. And that kind of spooked me a little. I didn't know anything about kombucha then. It was a number of years later still. So years down the line, when a friend introduced me to what it was, and then I had to read about it before I even tried it because it looked pretty creepy. When I did try it, within a week, I noticed that instead of sinkfuls and massive amount of hair, I could have an entire week go by in my brush, like a small little handful. The sugar cravings were gone. I didn't even, you know, crave ice cream. It corrected the yeast overgrowth in my system. What happens is people take antibiotics, they're on medications, your normal bacteria gets flushed out or killed off by medications, etc., all sorts of things, all sorts of factors. Your yeast gets out of control. When it's not in balance, the yeast feeds on sugar. So I had a severe yeast overgrowth. And that was kind of, and when I kind of educated myself on what all that was, and that I noticed this immediately within that week. Some people notice more with the digestive thing, with maybe more of their digestive tract. Other people notice with the B vitamins in it, they notice mood changes for them. Everybody's different. Everybody's different.
Well, is there such thing as eating too much? I thought you know you should have
They balances everything. Balances everything. Start off with, if you're brand new to it, you don't know how your body's going to react, 4 ounces, see how that goes. Maybe try that for a few days or a week. If you're fine, increase it. Kind of cap it off at like, say, 3 wine glasses full in a day. It's not going to hurt you. You're not going to terribly, it's going to take a lot to get you to acidosis, which is, completely a high level of acidity. But just go out, go slow, and what happens is your body acclimates. You crave it when you need it. Again, you're gonna notice a shift. You don't crave caffeine. You might notice things that you change because the nutrients are coming from the finished kombucha product. So it's kind of good to just take it slow and easy until you know how you acclimate to it.
First off, thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate that very much. It's very nice of you. Did it help with the yeast overgrowth, like that alone?
It eliminated it. It
Wow.
eliminated it. And what you'll find is that, again, you'll find that you might crave it, and once you're introduced to it, you're like, oh wait, I don't want caffeine. Oh, I don't want nicotine. I actually want that because now you've introduced it, and you're getting the nutrients that your body's actually either deprived of or deficient in. And you'll notice like energy. You might notice alertness.
I just want to say something. There are a lot of people who have yeast problems. They've been told repeatedly over and over, no more fermented food, no more fermented food. So this might create a little confusion. How is this doing that? And one thing I just keep in mind, everything to extreme is when everything goes wrong. Fermented food like this have been used for centuries to heal. What happens is that it creates a balance in the body, and the balance is what you desire. So when you have a proper balance of the flora in the system, even the yeast won't have the opportunity to flourish in there. So don't go extreme one way or another. I get that all the time. I can't have any vinegar, I can't have this, I can't have this. And I wish I could just tell them, you're wrong, but I don't tell them that because I won't see them again. But I know that they're going in the wrong direction many times because it's not that. You need some fermented foods to create a proper balance as well. Just the right type of food. So just keep that in mind because that's going to be coming up as an important point.
And it's also good to keep in mind that it's the normal flora it's the good bacteria in your system is what keeps the yeast in check. It's got to be the right bacteria. It's all about the right things and the right balance again. So in terms of the yeast, it's the bacteria that you're replenishing back to your system that's going to put the yeast in check because we need yeast in our body too. It's the balance.
I was just going to ask, I know you said that when you take, say you're going to share this scoby with us or whoever today, and then they're going to make a batch from that. So if we wanted to possibly manipulate the taste of the batch, if we could try to, would that then be affected by the source of the scoby? If you had manipulated yours to taste a certain way, you get what I mean? Like more sugar, less sugar?
Well, it will alter. Everything alters everything. Yeah. So what happens is, and I'm just going to read this directly because it's just easier. It's an ever-changing community of bacteria and yeast interacting dynamically whose production of kombucha beverage is influenced by the following factors. Types and quantities of bacteria and yeast actually in the fungus at this moment in time, season of the year, types of the water used, the ratio of culture mass to the nutrient liquid, meaning if you have more batched kombucha, starter kombucha, and less of your sweet tea, that's a factor. Humidity during the period of fermentation, the ratio of the liquid to the container, the altitude at which the fermentation takes place, the amount of lightness or darkness, the length of time, the intended healing benefits that you're targeting from more medicinal properties, the types and amounts of nutrients that provide optimal production of the desired health benefits. Basically, it's all, again, and it's flexible, it's forgiving, so you don't have to worry. But if you brew it up with different tea, like black tea versus what I use with green, your finished product will taste different than mine.
I guess what I really meant was, does the scoby itself take on a taste? And will that affect your product? Like if yours tasted different than what I was saying could have brewed, does it affect your product and scoby itself?
In terms of if I were to taste the actual scoby, no,
I don't know. I guess it's like a sponge, and whatever you flavor your mushroom with is what it's more going to taste like. So that's kind of what I guess.
No, you can alter that. That can alter because again, it's all these different factors and it's ever changing. It can be like one time I tried black tea and I thought it was a little less. I liked more Granny Smith apple. So I switched, and then one time I did a mixture of black tea bags with green tea bags. One time I did white tea white tea, but to me that ended up being flat. Or maybe it was the sugar I used. So you can experiment. And then I just went back to the green tea, and then I got back that same flavor. So it's not going to permanently.
I think maybe what she was asking was, if she takes your green tea Scoby and she wants to make it a black tea Scoby, will the fact that it started out as a green tea Scoby affect the flavor of the black tea Scoby? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
No, because you know what happens is every batch you make, a brand new Scoby is going to form. And let's say if you thought that was a concern, you throw the previous one away, just continue to build your new ones. Yeah.
I have two small questions. One is, in order to reap the benefits of kombucha, do you have to drink it on a daily basis? Is that, like for the rest of your life type of thing? Or?
In essence, it's yes and no. Like you don't have to drink it every single day. There's days I'll go drink it once a week. But it's like any other nutrients. In order to get the beneficial properties of kale, you got to take in. You got to eat kale. But so it's not a cure-all. It's a nutrient.
I see.
And so and fluctuating the time
And the second little question is, can you use loose tea since you're straining it out anyway?
You can. I haven't
Or does
ever.
that get,
You just want to make sure you strain it all out when you go to put it in your jar.
Because the tea bags some of them probably break anyway. Does that ever happen to you?
It has, and I'll kind of fish it out a little. You can either use the tea balls, put your loose tea in it instead of dumping it and letting it be flat. It's those
Strainers.
Boil them up.
On the side.
Yeah. But what is it?
You can get glass.
What is it made
They're
out of?
called tea infusers.
Are you allowed to boil that with the metal? Right.
Well, that's only when you're boiling your sweet tea. Because once it goes to room temperature, you take the tea out, you take that metal thing out, and then you put your SCOBY in your tea in the glass jar.
So you can't do that.
For the fermenting process.
Some of those really delicious ones, some of them taste like raspberry, some of them taste like, there's one I love, I think it's Trilogy it's called. How do you get that? Do you actually take your drink, your finished product, and add a little juice to it to change?
You can. It's anything you want to create it.
Yeah, to answer that question, what you can do is after you've bottled your finished product, is you can just simply add fruit, whether it's strawberries, raspberries, ginger, however you want to flavor it, but you do it at the finished end of the process.
And that's what you're doing. You're infusing different flavors. For me, I actually want to keep it as, I don't want to say pure, but as kombucha perfect, like pure as possible. So what I ended up doing is that to just give a nice flavor to it, what I did do is I chopped up, because I have my skinny bottles, I made matchsticks, chopped up, losing my thoughts, ginger into matchsticks and apple. Just dropped them in, and it gave a really nice flavor. You can put strawberries, blueberries, but again, it's not in with the fermenting, it's at the end when you're putting it in your fridge or if you leave it room temperature. So there's endless possibilities with the flavors, and that's why now these companies that deal solely in kombucha, like in California, they've got every kind of different creative thing imaginable. And and here, gingerade, blueberry, like berry blast. I mean, you can use. It's just you do that to the finished products.
How long does the finished product last?
Well, in my house, it doesn't last very long. See, I usually, again, if you drink it, like about 3 glassfuls a day. That's about, what is that? 3 winefuls. Is that?
It's about 15.
250 milliliters equals about 3 wine glasses. I mean, I could drink through mine in, I haven't even counted, but
3 days worth right there.
probably, yeah. I mean, in my house, there's 6 of these in my fridge. And I typically only drink 2 glasses a day. I'll drink mine I like to drink mine in the afternoon and like in the evenings.
Right.
So, everything that I read is that once you bottle it, and then you open it again, you need about 2 weeks to drink that thing. And it's better to keep it in the refrigerator than after you open.
And if you didn't have it in the fridge, what's gonna happen is you're gonna have a SCOBY forming in your bottle, which is fine. You just drink that and
So I know with like brewing beer, you have to go through a disinfecting process with bottling. Is that, do you have to do the same thing with bottling with kombucha?
so that's a good question, because we're gonna move on to, so we boiled the water, we put it, you dissolve the sugar, room temperature, after, again, you steep your tea, you let it set, let's say it's done, you get to your done portion. What you're gonna do then is when it's finished, you tasted it, you like it, it's ready to go. Again, every time you go to do the process, I spritz, again, because I'm using tap water, I'll spritz it with vinegar. Vinegar is my best friend. It's in my kitchen, I clean with it, I use it on my vegetables, everything. So I'll rinse everything and just spritz it, and then use some vinegar and then dry it off with a non-lint absorbable. And then, so when this is finished, that's when the batching comes in. So for the batching process, what I do is I'll have my measuring glass, just because it's what works for me. You taste it, you like it, you're opening it up, and then with clean hands or your wooden spoons, you lift out, or you don't have to lift out, but I find it easier. I take it out, put it into a glass container. It can be a pie dish, it can be a casserole dish, anything clear glass. Cover it, because fruit flies are just, they'll find their way anything. So you cover, once you cover it, it's waiting for you. I only leave it in that jar long enough to wash this out. I take then 10%, or in my case with this, about 700, about, let's see, what is that, 2.5 cups, 3 cups, basically 10% of whatever's in here. Save that as a reserve. Take this and I dump it into a pitcher. All of it goes into a pitcher. This is still covered. I go and I reserve a special sponge only for my kombucha stuff, for beginning my process, batching, and before and after. I will dump all that in that. You don't have to cover the kombucha, you're just protecting your SCOBY. And what you're gonna do is you wash out regular dish soap. I wash out the my jar. I always clean the jar. Some people are like, hey, you know, it's the kombucha, it's environment. I don't. Every single batch, I clean my jar out, just with some detergent. I dry it with my towel, again, so nothing ends up contaminating my SCOBY. And then what'll happen is I'll put my reserve back in here, which is only that 10%, back in with the SCOBY covered back up. Because then there's no flies, dust, you know, pathogens, airborne, anything. It goes right back in, it just waits for me. Then, here's my batch, it's all ready. This is where your bottles of choice come in. I used to use cheesecloth for this process. So after I've cleaned my utensils, like you said, including the pie dish and the lid, here's my kombucha that's finished. All I'm doing now is I have my funnel. I used to use cheesecloth for this process because it catches all the strands, all the little slimy bits that you could drink if you want to. I personally don't. It's just kind of gross, muddy and mucky and slimy. It's not very attractive. So then I stopped with the cheesecloth. I got this strainer. I love this because I don't have to cut and go buy cheesecloth anymore. The little strainer goes on top and I'm just dumping it in. And each, you know, then you're just washing the slimy bits off of there. Now, just to qualify the cheesecloth, on the instructions I said that's what you would use to cap this. That's actually not. I meant paper towel because the cheesecloth is too open. It's too open. The weave is too far apart, and little gnats, anything, bugs, smoke, you know, whatever. I mean, and when I say smoke, I mean like your stove smoke. No smoker, like no cigarette smoke. It'll make its way in. So this was actually just to strain out the slime.
So Yeah, I noticed that you said that, like, if you burn stuff on the stove, and, you know, what, the smoke will get in there and kill the smoke?
You want your SCOBY away from the stove because you use cooking oils, you have air stuff, you have smoke, you have grease, you have, you know what, and you want to protect your culture. Keep it like over by your recipe books. If you're going to keep it in a closet, kind of not in a closet closed, but in like a maybe an open cupboard. It needs ventilation.
So it needs to breathe.
It needs to breathe. It needs ventilation. No direct sunlight.
Okay.
Away from the garbage. Away from. It'll look. Yeah.
Primarily a mushroom, right?
It's really not a mushroom.
So they refer to it as that.
It's only because it's kind of got it looks like, you know, maybe like a mushroom. It's kind of got that wet, soft, or slimy feel of it, but it really isn't a mushroom by any kind of. It is a fungus. It's a bacteria and fungus matrix, and it's a colony, so it's a living structure, and it's continually building and multiplying itself, which is why it'll get thicker. It'll start out tissue thin, and then it continues to get thicker. Then it becomes like a pancake, and then when I was trying to separate mine, mine got to be like 3.5 inches thick.
Wow.
So, and some of them won't fuse together. Some of them will stay separated, but you can separate them or leave them together, and they fuse together if you can't find space.
I was under the understanding that the SCOBY has to always be in that 10%.
In the 10% what?
While you're, like you said, put the SCOBY separate, it always has to be in its environment.
No, she's talking about while she cleans. So
Just
she puts
long-
the SCOBY in there.
just
she
long
puts the
enough to-
10%.
So the SCOBY is separate without any of the original batch. And to my understanding, it always has to be in that.
I mean, when I'm batching, or when you
No,
go
you
to...
took it out, put it in the Pyrex
Right,
bag.
right.
You didn't put any in a liquid, original liquid.
Well, it's saturated, so for the 3 to 5 minutes it takes me to wash out my container. I mean, you could dump it in, but I just kind of put it in there, cover it, and it's so saturated that even when I'm separating them and I'm throwing some out in my garden or to just throw away, and it by itself it goes in here, and by the time I'm done with my whole process, the one that's in there, it ends up, I'll even wring it out, like I'm wringing it out to toss it in the back, because I want to keep, the kombucha that's in it. So for that brief period of time, you can leave it in there. If you prefer to dump some more in there, by all means do that, when you're washing out your container. When you do strain it, once you do bottle it, this part's done, you literally are bottling it. It can go right in your fridge, or you add your fruit, your juice, or however you want to change up the finished product. That's pretty much it. What you can do then is, if you want to ignore it for a while, you can leave this sit until you're ready to brew your next sweet tea, which is basically boiling your water, adding the sugar, adding the tea bags again.
2 questions. One, if it's sitting, do you need to feed it since it's a live colony?
Funny thing about that is I've left it for a couple weeks where it was literally in only the 10%, because I just thought, I'm going to do it later, and it continues to multiply itself, and it didn't seem to starve, and then so I really don't. In the interim, I leave it in the solution because otherwise you're going to have so many scobies, and you're just going to have them growing right out of the jar. So I kind of wait, and then when I brew it up again, I'm giving.
I think after 4 weeks it turns to vinegar, going out of town for 4 weeks or more.
What you do is you leave enough in there that it can set in there just fine. I've left mine for months, without adding more sugar, because if you're away, just make sure that the liquid doesn't evaporate out. And if you're going to go away and you're going away, just make sure you give it more sugar. Just give it a good dose of the nutrient tea, the sweet tea. Then you leave, and it's self-sustaining.
And that'll make it sweet, right? You do that like next day, whatever, next couple of days. Yeah, the sugar.
With what? It'll make what sweet?
I don't know, the juice. We add the sugar in.
Well, if you're, let's say this is, let's say I'm gonna go away, and this is, because right now there's no, this is the finished product. I didn't even add any sweet tea, because I wanted to make sure there was enough to send home to whoever wants one. And I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna go, I'll add, what I would do is add my sweet tea in there, just to give it its nutrients. But it's not drinkable, like, you're giving it its nutrients while you're gonna be going away. So it's gonna be sweet, but it's gonna also be feeding on the
I
sugar.
think he likes it sweeter than what I make it, which means you have to stop it earlier.
What you wanna make sure is that it's not, that you're not drinking the sugar. You wanna make sure it's converted into the natural sugars, from
But
that.
you can have the sugar after the fact, if you want it sweeter.
And if you wanted to, you know, after the fact, then put your herbal tea into the finished product. You just don't want it with the Scoby. So you could put your, you know, your different herbal teas
The
in.
second question was, when you have the finished batch, it's in your refrigerator, how long can that stay? Is that forever, is there a time, shelf life?
I don't, there isn't really a shelf life, because the fact that it's in the fridge, it slows down the fermenting process. It might get a little bit more, but at a very, very slow rate, maybe continue to become more vinegary, but it would take a really long time. So, yeah, I mean, I've had, mine won't last in mine for very long, but if you did leave it in there, you can even leave your batch out on room temperature, you know, your bottled ones. That will ferment, that will have a second fermentation, that will get sour, but the refrigerated product will slow the process.
When you start the process again, like just make a new batch, do you throw away the 10% that was previously sitting in, like Scoby?
I'm sorry?
Like, because you know how you put in 10% of your batch? Mm-hmm. So when you go to make like a new batch, do you have to throw away 10% that was previously in?
No, you need that,
The 10% is the acidic, because this is acidic. When you make your tea that has the sugar in it on the stove, that is extremely, you know, that's more like the alkaline. You don't want it. You want to make sure that you put the acidic starter tea. That 10% reserve is what kickstarts the fermenting process in the sugary one. If you didn't add this, you would get mold. Your Scoby would get moldy. You're at room temperature. If you've ever accidentally left your, you know, let's say you were boiling your gallon, right? And then you didn't get to put your room temperature tea in with your Scoby for a day or two, it's gonna get bad. Your tea is gonna go bad. You've got all that sugar in it, and it's gonna cause mold to grow in your Scoby. So the fact that you have the acidic portion of your finished product, the kombucha, is what kickstarts it. If you didn't have this, like let's say you're only getting your Scoby tonight and it's only liquid enough to get you home, then you use white distilled vinegar as your 10% starter. So you're never without. You can always grow it, you know, start it with the kombucha that you buy, or use the distilled vinegar, white distilled vinegar. You use apple cider? Apple cider vinegar? The recommendations in all my files I've always found was always saying white. Why? I didn't really investigate that. If anybody else can contribute to that.
Apple cider vinegar is not as acidic.
How much do you put in?
Of what?
Of the white vinegar?
If you're making it, it's 10%, and I say that as a rule of thumb. When I make a gallon,
10% of the jar?
10% of your container.
I see.
So like, and you always want to add, you always want to make sure that there's an inch of airspace from the shoulder of your container, because the surface space is what gives it the breathable, you know, the oxygen. And if it was clean up into here, now your surface space, the open surface space, is smaller than the width and the depth.
So the one you're giving us, let's say tonight, go home, put it in a normal size, like small jar?
So it can be a small, like these jars are perfect
Yeah,
here
something
because
like
they're straight up, they're
Right.
a wide mouth.
Yeah.
All of these are wide mouth. These are all really, you know, they're
And
really
then
good. So
it'll
whether
grow?
you have this jar and you're 10%, you can eyeball it, like
Yeah.
10%, you know.
I
or if it's this jar. Because I get confused with trying to do the whole conversion tables between
Yeah.
milliliters and liters and gallons, and I get
Decide, well.
10%, just like, okay, that's that much, you know?
Put 10% vinegar in.
That's what
Keeps a lot of your fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I missed that. You said that we have half the amount of space while it's fermenting for the 10 days, is that?
Well, what I'm saying is that you want to have about an inch or so from the shoulder. So
Okay.
therefore, like when I make my tea, if I overmake this and I don't fill it all the way up, I leave from the shoulder of it, not the neck, but the shoulder, about an inch of airspace. Yeah, so then that way it'll give it, you know, oxygen and ventilation, and it'll actually produce your scobies. And it will always be the surface space of your container. So because my container is this big, my scobies are this big. If it's, you know, that, they're going to be discs.
And the scobies is what contains all the nutrients, right?
The SCOBY
so
is
if you don't drink it, let's say, because I know that I've had bottles and all of a sudden I would feel it in my mouth and it feels like a jellyfish. I mean, but that's where all the goodness is, right? Or the health benefit.
That is the culture that converts the sugar, and you know, the teas have the polyphenols in them. Okay, like the green tea, you've heard polyphenols are really good, antioxidants, etc., nutrients. They convert the sugars into your enzymes, B vitamins, and organic acids.
So it's not the SCOBY really? So you can
The
really take that out.
SCOBY is the worker bee to do it for you, and the finished product, the byproduct of the SCOBY is the kombucha that's good for you. Now I read people eat or saute and fry and whatever. I'm not that adventurous. You can eat your SCOBY, but I haven't done it yet. I just know that I've kind of got the little jellyfish sometimes. Once in a while, I've like, because I put my glass in the fridge to just finish it, and it'll start making a little, and I'm like, no, can't do that. No. I'll take my finger and fish it out. Yeah, it's fine. It's perfectly fine.
You can swallow it.
You can swallow it. You can eat it if you want to try. On the next class, anybody that's adventurous to try their SCOBY, let me get. They saute it.
I know you're saying it multiplies. Is there a point that you know, do you need to separate it, or can you just let it kind of do its thing? Is there a point where you should?
You don't have to separate it. What happens though is in my jars, literally, what happens is it evaporates, okay, because it, you know, it gives off its gases, and eventually your scobies outnumber the volume of liquid, and then you don't even get kombucha because it's so smothered by like this many kombucha cultures and their liquids down here. So at some point you're either trying to give them away to people or throw them in your plant, eat them, put them in your yard, garden.
What's your garden look like? Does it help them go good?
What does your garden look like? Right? I don't really have a garden right now. I've got to like, but they are. I mean, you can put them in your garden. I have to redesign my garden. But so the scobies are out. You got to just like find places for them because they will multiply quickly. If you find that they don't, you know, maybe it's a room temperature factor. Again, going back to the different factors that play a role in your kombucha. Let's see what else I was just trying to.
So you squeeze these four things out?
Yeah, the ones that I say, okay, I'm going to sacrifice this one to the yard. I'll take it and because I want the kombucha.
Okay.
So I'll squeeze it. It's really thick and it's really hardy. It's like almost like not leathery, not quite leathery, but it's pretty durable. So I'm squeezing it out because I want to make sure I add that to my my finished product.
Probably be great in the compost heap. Probably be great in the compost pile.
Oh yeah. So that's kind of it. I'm just trying to think of other factors that, in terms of clarifying things with the instructions.
Okay, so let me just give you back your instructions to make sure we got all this.
Okay.
This sounds really pretty simple. I'm a little bit frightened by how simple it sounds. You know what I mean? Like really.
I'm with you.
Like it should be more complicated than what I'm digesting. So you're boiling a gallon of water. in that gallon of water, you're dissolving about a cup and a half, a cup and 3/4 of a nice organic sugar, sugar of your choice. You're putting 6 to 8 green or black combination of tea bags in there, and you're setting it aside until it comes to room temperature. Once it comes to room temperature, you're putting your SCOBY with 10%, so it comes to 10% of the jar, into a wide mouth jar, pouring your sweet tea on, putting it in a paper towel, putting it over the top of the jar, rubber band, set it out of sunlight, not in the closet, leaving it alone, checking in about 5 days.
That's it.
Oh, baby.
See, I'm not good in the kitchen, and when I saw how simple this was, I'm like, no, this has to be more complicated than that.
I expected it to be